Welcome to the Twisted Stories podcast. I'm Frank Davis. Today's story is called Birdstrike. 7:45 a.m. Harry, just hang on a second, will you? Myrtle sounded as calm and relaxed as usual. I can't be late for work, Myrtle, Harry said anxiously. He absolutely could not be late for work. I can't be late for work, Myrtle, Harry said anxiously. He absolutely could not be late for work. It was a matter of pride. He had been unable to enlist because of his hand. When he was a boy, he had been lost overnight in the woods and had injured his left hand. Although it was as strong, if not stronger than his right hand, it was smaller than it should be and misshapen. Harry was a well-made young man. He was of average height, thin but wiry, with straw-colored hair. Aside from the slight deformation of his left hand, he was unremarkable. The job at Bomber Ferry Command near Toronto meant that although he couldn't enlist as a soldier, he could still do his part for the war effort. Myrtle, however, was literally getting in the way. She took up all his free time. Harry met her at a dance soon after arriving in Gander. She was a pretty brunette who worked as a typist. Since they both worked at Gander Airfield, Harry was more than happy to provide her with the right to work each day. Before too much time had passed, they were spending much of their time together. They weren't a couple, or even dating, but Harry felt that might change in the near future. Myrtle finally sat in the passenger seat. Okay, Harry, my dear, let's go, she said, slamming the car door. The road was icier than the day before, and the car slipped twice on the frozen road. Harry's gaze shifted from the road to Myrtle's fingers clutching the dashboard. Hang on, Myrtle, my dear. 3 p.m. Harry strapped down the last load in the bay of the Avro Lancaster. The Avro Lancaster was a long-range heavy bomber aircraft. It was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Empty, it weighed 33,650 pounds and had a maximum takeoff weight of 72,000 pounds. It was 69 feet long and 20 feet high and had a wingspan of 106 feet. Harry thought the Avro Lancaster the most beautiful thing, besides Myrtle, that he had ever seen. Hang on to something, Harry, we're going up. Captain Giro's voice sounded from the cockpit. Harry smiled at the captain's choice of words, but did as he was ordered. It wasn't every day Harry was allowed to go up with the flight crew. He was a civilian employee, after all. The Bomber Ferry Command dispatched North American-made aircraft across the Atlantic. Harry was just one of thousands of civilian workers employed during the war. The bomber taxied down the runway and paused briefly. Its mighty engines roared. With a lurch, they were airborne, and once again Harry felt the familiar feeling of flight. The Avro Lancaster climbed to 4,000 feet and began the long bank that would return them to the airfield. From the cockpit, he heard the sound of glass shattering and Captain Giro's voice shouting once again for him to hold on to something. Birdstrike, Birdstrike, Ross, the co-pilot, repeated into the radio. The Avro yawed unexpectedly, and the deck disappeared from under Harry's feet. In the cockpit, the pilot struggled to regain control. In the investigation which followed, it could not be determined whether it had been Giro or Ross who had accidentally hit the lever which controlled the bay doors. Harry saw the earth far below as he fell through the belly of the plane. His hands grabbed at the edge of the hatch, and he felt like a trapeze artist on a swing. Jiro and Ross struggled to bring the Avro under control. In the sudden descent, neither of the pilots could release his hold on the yoke without losing absolute control of the plane. "Hang on, Harry!" Jiro yelled over his shoulder, his voice barely audible against the roar of the engines. Ross no longer spoke into the radio. He prayed. Harry knew he could not hold on much longer. The feeling had gone from his hands. He grasped the edge of the hatch as if each finger had a mind of its own. He could not have released his grip if he had wanted to. He was too scared to feel frightened, and he realized finally that he was no longer falling, but flying. He shut his eyes against the wind. He felt his trousers slip from his legs and pull against his boots. He almost reached down to cover himself. He opened his eyes at last and saw what he thought must be Lake St. Louis, as small as a woman's looking glass, far below him. He heard the captain, or perhaps Myrtle, telling him to just hang on. He thought he would strangle the next person to tell him to hang on. The frozen lake was suddenly just a few feet below him. This close, the ice no longer seemed to Harry a thing separate from himself. Captain Jiro turned the yoke slightly and the Avro shuddered. Harry was shaken loose and dropped the impossibly short distance of less than a foot to the ice. He skidded across the ice, his momentum diminishing as the Avro Lancaster's roar grew fainter in the distance. Harry stood unsteadily in the sudden silence of the frozen lake, his trousers still pulled around his boots. The ice spread out smooth and unbroken in all directions. He was uninjured except for his hands, which he held close to his body. The sound of the bomber echoed in his ears, and he realized he was screaming. He pulled his trousers up with difficulty because he still could not feel his hands. Then he began to walk. At a farmhouse, a woman gave him hot tea and wrapped him in a blanket. He awoke in hospital. His hands were bandaged, but he felt refreshed. "Myrtle?" he asked the nurse. "Hang on. I'll get her." Thank you for listening to this episode of the Twisted Stories podcast. If you've liked the show, please follow us, give us a like, and tell your friends. See you next time.